The first part, I suppose, is slightly more theoretical, and then the second part is the more practical. At least that's the way we hope it's going to work out. And I suppose what we asked people to do for this presentation was, first of all, to look at the policies that are in their institutions at the moment. And I was quite surprised that when I went looking for policies, I couldn't find one. And I suppose I wasn't that surprised, if I'm being honest, but because I think one of the problems with policies sometimes when you start talking about policies is that people are almost afraid of them, because when you put a policy into a school, then you're committing yourself that you have to follow that, and then if later on you make some mistake or do something wrong, somebody's going to come back and say you didn't follow your policy and you put yourself into a difficult position maybe. So even though we didn't have specific policies, there is quite a lot happening with sustainability in the various colleges, and so I thought I'd look at, to some extent, how maybe they could be put together into a policy. So what I said was basically, first of all, I said, and I know this is very small, I said we'd look at what's already out there, so what's already there if you were trying to create a policy. You know, you're not starting from scratch, basically, because there has to be other policies out there. And the first thing I did was I did a Google search just in the Cork area, just to see how many schools had policies or how many had published policies. And again, I was very surprised to find that I only got one. And that was a primary school, and it was one of the, what we call Educate Together schools, so to be maybe slightly off-centre primary school. And they're very, very good schools, and this particular school had a very good policy, but it was very much aimed at primary school kids, and really a long, long way from VET, which is what we're looking at. But to be fair to them, at least they had a policy. So then I looked at national policies, and I didn't find an awful lot either, but I did see that we have a national strategy on sustainability in education. So I suppose if you're creating a policy, one of the first things you should be looking at is, well, what's the national policy? Do we have to follow any particular guidelines or rules, what's already there? And I'm not going to go into, because this is just the Irish policy, so I'm not going to go into specifically what was in that policy, but just to say that national policies are the first thing obviously you should look at. And then you have to look at what's the EU doing, or the EU saying. And the EU has quite ambitious goals. They want to be the first climate neutral continent by 2050. So if they want to achieve that, there's an awful lot of work that has to be done in the next 25 years. But in particular, they produced a thing called the Green Comp. And Green Comp basically is the European framework for sustainability. And the idea is that it's supposed to be used as a way of bringing together a framework and policies in schools. The problem with Green Comp is it's actually quite theoretical. It's probably the best word. We have another project running at the moment called Green VetNet. And the Green VetNet project, in that we're specifically looking at what do employers need in vet, and then how do we train students to meet that employment need. And we're using that Green Comp as part of that, as the framework for that project. But the difficulty with it is it's not practical. It doesn't come down to the practical level where it says, in my school, we're not going to use plastic cups anymore. We're not going to use plastic cutlery. We're going to reduce our paper usage and so on. It doesn't come down to that level, if you like. So in a way, it's more a theoretical framework at a higher level. But at the same time, it is the European framework, and it is the one that's been used by a lot of national bodies, particularly bodies creating exam work. So, for example, in Ireland, our certifying body is called Quality Qualifications Ireland, QQI, and they're producing sustainability modules at the moment, and they're actually using the Green Comp framework as the basis for all the sustainability modules they're producing. So for that reason, it's an important document, and it's available online, it's available to download. Not easy reading, but it's there. I then looked to say, in Ireland, what other initiatives are there? What maybe could you build your policy on? And in Ireland, we have a thing called the Green Campus Initiative. And basically, Green Campus is, what's the best way to describe it? It's a body, an organisation that campuses can sign up to say that they're more green than others, if you like, or that they're following a green agenda. And Green Campus has a specific set of rules that you must follow. And once you follow those rules, you can then apply to be designated as a Green Campus. So for example, up here, it's run by Antashka, and Antashka is basically the organisation in Ireland that looks at things like, trying to preserve forestry, trying to preserve old monuments and so on. So Are they government or semi-government? I'm not sure.
They're an NGO.
They're an NGO, okay, so they're an NGO. And it's they run it, and I just jump to the next slide, because in the next slide it says there are 7 steps involved. And I know Bart is going to talk about this more in detail in a minute, but the 7 steps for a green campus is, first of all, you've got to establish a committee of staff, and the idea is that the committee will then be the ones to push forward this agenda. The second step is to undertake an environmental review, so to look at your own college, say what's the current situation, what's there at the moment. You then move on to implementing an action plan to make it more green, monitoring and evaluating that action plan, and then linking the programme to the curricular work. So how does the Green Campus Initiative link up to what you're teaching and to what's happening in the curriculum? And then informing and involving the wider campus community, and then lastly developing a green charter. And basically the idea is that's just if you like, the steps that they use towards getting a green campus. So the same thing would apply if you're trying to develop a policy. What steps do you want to take in developing that policy? And obviously I'd argue that because we want a holistic approach from this project, that any committee that will be setting up a school's policy should include both teachers and students, because you really need a very strong student buy-in, otherwise it's just not going to work. So it should really be a committee of teachers and students. And then looking at the current situation that you have in the college, what are you currently doing, and then where do you want to move to, the plan for that movement, and then evaluation of that. So they're the kind of things that should probably be included into a policy. Then I just said here that a whole school approach is needed, so that really there's not much point in one department or one section within the school trying to push sustainability and the rest of the school ignoring it. It really has to be a buy-in from everybody within the school or institute. And that includes teachers, it includes students, but very importantly it also includes things like caretaking staff, administration staff, and the other stakeholders basically that you're working with, because some larger institutes, for example, might have catering companies that are subcontracted to provide food in the canteen and something, and they need to be brought into this process as well, because they also have a role to play. And then you have a whole school approach, environmental sustainable learning across the institution, and very importantly the word there, mindset, because really whether you have sustainability in your college or not very much comes down to people's values and their mindset. What do people expect? What's the norm? Because very often you'll find that we all fit into the norm. You know, if everybody else is doing it, you're inclined to do it as well. So it's a matter of changing your mindset and maybe being more aware of what's happening in the college and saying, well, how can we make that better then, and the mindset to make that better. And then we had, to include it in the governance, teaching and learning frameworks within the college. So that's again the same thing really, it's to make it holistic, so that's included in all aspects of what we're doing in the colleges. And then active student inclusion, so that there should be an inclusive whole school plan. Drafting a future-oriented perspective, so you're looking to the future, you're looking to what's not just going to happen now this year, but what's going to happen in 5 years' time, what's going to happen in 10 years' time. Shifting from a focus on environmental education to learning for sustainability, as the latter regards learners as active, engaged agents of change. So you're not just teaching somebody sustainability, it's not just delivering a course on sustainability, it's actively having people involved, actively doing something. One of the schools in the ETB, for example, there's a teacher there, his name is Pranchius, and he's very involved in cleaning the coasts. You know, people who go down to the beaches every weekend and pick up all the plastic and so on. And I was talking to him recently, he is very much, his school is involved in that, even though the organisation is external to the school. But he has 1,400 secondary school students now who have signed up to go and clean the beaches, and who turn up maybe once a month, is what kind of the involvement from each student is, and to spend an hour or two literally collecting plastic and rubbish off the beaches and so on. So I mean, that's a huge commitment to get that many people, that many secondary school kids to actually engage with this. So that's really what we mean by being actively involved. So it's who the school engages with and so on. Then we have shifting from focus, sorry, to that one. As teachers, we have the privilege to be able to engage with students, and just basically students, I suppose the younger people are the ones who've been very much pushing the climate agenda. I don't think anybody who's seen the climate protests in the last couple of years and so on can dispute that. And I suppose to some extent it is their future, but at the same time we're all responsible. So everybody has a role to play, but certainly we shouldn't underestimate the role that young people play. And I know that in Ireland, even the primary schools are very much starting to push that agenda. And you start at a young age basically, so that sustainability becomes the norm in your life. And then it's not so much a matter of changing something or giving something up. It's that the sustainable approach is the more normal when it's the thing you're used to. It's what you expect to do. So that's what we mean there. The other thing, just I'm not going to read through all these, but one of the things that is being pushed in Ireland very much at the moment as well is the whole idea of forest schools and green schools. The idea that people learn better if they have more exercise, if they're out in the air more, if they're getting more connection to nature and so on. And I just wanted to note that, I suppose, that that's also something that can go into a policy, because very often in vocational education, we spend all of our time indoors, we ignore what's happening outside, and it's very much that you're teaching, electronics or IT or mechanics or whatever. But if there is some way of engaging with green spaces and engaging with the outside environment, that actually is proved to help the education process. In Cork, we have a group called Green Spaces, who try to take areas within the city and to try to make them greener. And they've been quite successful in parts of the city over the last couple of years. But in particular, what I wanted to mention there was just for students that becoming actively involved and in implementing green initiatives within their area, not just necessarily within the school, but within the wider area, and engaging with nature. I'm nearly done. So good sustainability policies then. We were just pointing out again some of the benefits. So, the benefits of working in biodiversity, that you reduce energy demand, adapt to climate risks, drive innovation in construction, act as catalysts for green jobs, deliver savings and so on. And again, I suppose, even though I say in this project that we're trying to do things that we can control, but once you do something in your own college that you have control of, that obviously has knock-on effects, because another college will see what you've done, and then there's the possibility that they might copy that. And then students within the college, especially students when they come to voting age, will be more inclined to vote for green initiatives, to vote for political parties that support green initiatives and so on. If principals and management are engaged properly in the sustainability process, then when it comes time for putting in new buildings or putting in new facilities, one of the things that should be high on their agenda is, are these buildings sustainable? Can we put solar panels on the roof? Can the buildings retain energy better and so on? So again, that whole holistic process, the more people who are involved, the more likely you are to get a good sustainability result. And then lastly, jobs. You can't really talk about vocational education without talking about jobs. And one thing that's very clear across Europe at the moment is that the number of green jobs, the number of jobs involving sustainability elements, or the number of jobs that are specifically just about sustainability, have increased and will continue to increase very dramatically in the next couple of years. In Cork, in the training centre, some of you have been to the training centre in Cork, we're just after opening a new centre specifically to train apprentices in putting up solar panels, in sustainable heating methods, in retrofitting older houses to make sure that they're more energy efficient and so on. And it's simply because that there's an awful lot of work for people from the vocational sector in the sustainability industry now. So even from a job point of view, and from a point of view of training your students for the jobs that are out there, it becomes very important that sustainability is included, and is very much included within your school activities, or your institute activities. And in the conclusions, so the conclusion I had was that there's a strong case for sustainable policy in your school or college. It can take inspiration from existing European, national and local policies. It needs to be holistic and inclusive. It needs integration into school policies, so it has to be fully integrated. And that's something I should have said as I went along. Obviously every school here has its own policies already. And they have policies on probably bullying and probably policies on attendance, and you have a list of policies that you have. Obviously sustainability needs to be incorporated into all of that. It can't just be, put aside as an extra or something, because it affects everything we do, basically. So it has to be incorporated into the existing policies. It needs to recognise that learning can be gained through a whole school sustainability action. It feeds into the curriculum and future job market. It can interact with other initiatives, such as the Green Campus one in Ireland, but I'm sure other countries will have similar initiatives. There should be space for staff and student initiatives. And again, that's very important to allow students to come forward with their ideas and to be willing to take those ideas on and to fund them, to support them, and so on. You should support green choices in the built environment. That's a bit more difficult because sometimes, I suppose, what money you get for building your college and for adding to your college comes from usually central funding of some sort, whether it's regional funding or government. But still, it doesn't mean that you can't have an input and try to look for more sustainable options when the opportunity arises. And then lastly, it needs a high level of buy-in from all. So everybody really has to play their part in buying into this. Okay, so I'll let Bart take over.